Hello, everyone. I'm just getting set up here, so please send me your questions or let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about on this live podcast. Otherwise, I'll just start rambling about other things. So I'm just about to get the Instagram live going, and so give me 1 second. Here we go. Just trying to line up the cameras here. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Instagram live podcast on YouTube. I've got YouTube open. I've got Instagram live open. So welcome, everybody. I've realized that when I do these Instagram lives and YouTube lives, when they do the recording afterwards, and people are always asking about things that I said at the beginning. And when I do the recording, it takes it right from the start. So that's why I am speaking right now. So hello to all of you who are just joining. Thank you for joining me. There's a few there on the Instagram live, which is cool. I'm just going to turn down my sound here so that we can hear it. Everything okay? And I'm just trying to see if some people are joining on YouTube. That's cool. I am just going to send this out now. So it seems like there's a little bit of a delay on the YouTube one, which is kind of funny to watch. So thank you very much for joining this Instagram live podcast of the Motivated Classroom. I'm just in my house. This is not usually where I do the podcast. Usually I'm in a studio. It's all very professional. But right now I am in my house. It is October break. And so I've just decided to do this because I'm not doing an episode this week, trying to get a bit of a break from school and a break from the podcast and stuff like that. So that's why it's happening like this. So can you just let me know if you can hear me, those people who are Instagram and those people who are on the Motivated Classroom YouTube channel, and maybe just type me a comment or something. I've got 8 people here on the Instagram. People are gradually joining. I did say 5 o'clock, so I'm kind of waiting until then before I do it. So I'm just going to type this in here. So I can be heard. That's great. Okay, so go ahead, guys, and type some questions if you'd like me to answer them. I'm just typing into Twitter. I've got Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram open. I tried to do it on Facebook too, and I was like, that's going to be too much. There's going to be too much going on at once. So I've just got 2 going on. Okay, so that's tweeted out now. Okay, and all right, so I've got someone who wants to be part of my live video. So we'll try that, see how that works. Oh, declined. That's okay. I'm actually going to put my headphones in so I don't interfere with the sound on the YouTube either. See if this works. Okay, cool. This is working. Excellent. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to start talking about today is just quite a few people have been asking me about the use of target language in the classroom. Now, I think I'm going to make a full episode on that, to be honest, but there's been some really great questions to do with how much target language is too much target language, and is there such a thing as too much, or how much use of the first language is too much, and where is my take on that? So I think I'd like to kind of start by dealing with that a little bit. So hello, Tom Briardy. It's very nice of you to be here. It's a good friend of mine, not a language teacher. So, I mean, he's pushing the boat out to be part of this. So when we're talking about target language usage, I think one of the first things that strikes me is that we should use every opportunity we've got to give more comprehensible inputs to the student. And for me, that does include instructions on tasks, that includes instructions on digital tasks as well, on homework tasks, anywhere we can give comprehensible input to the students. Now, for example, if I'm typing in a homework task, or as I like to call it, a contact with the language task on the Google Classroom page, I will type that in Spanish, even for my beginners, but I will make sure that it's very simple language. And sometimes I'll need to edit it so it's really simple. And I might need to make bullet points so it's really simple. Or I may need to kind of in brackets put one English word that they might not know. At the end of the day, if they're really stuck, they can just copy and paste it into Google Translate. But the whole point is they're getting more inputs. They're reading from the Google Classroom. They're having a look at that. And then they're saying, oh, okay, so I'm starting to get more and more of those inputs. So I do think that that is an opportunity that we should use. So sometimes I see people make really great resources, fantastic resources, but it'll be a PowerPoint presentation and there'll be loads of English instructions and then maybe just one little bit of Spanish at the end. I would try and use those instructions for more comprehensible input, making sure that it is at a level that the students can understand. And maybe you have to put a bracket in English, or maybe you have to say something in English to make sure that they understand. But for me, those are opportunities that we should use. The imperative tense, as we know, in many languages is quite difficult, and Spanish is no exception. Same as French, it's quite hard, the imperative, so giving orders. And so the more that we can give our students those repetitions of that, I think then the more that they get used to seeing it. So for example, Spanish, like saying haz or no hagas, like do or don't do, those things, they need lots of repetitions for them. So I'm happy to put those into the PowerPoints, into the tests or whatever else, so that they are getting more comprehensible inputs through my use of my materials. And again, you know, I understand where people are coming from, saying, oh, but I want them to get straight into the task. I don't want them to be confused. So I put it in English. And yeah, sometimes, you know, maybe that is worth doing, or sometimes you may need to put something small, like a little explanation. And my nephew has just joined, Keelan Foy. Fair play. He's definitely not a language teacher. So really happy to see you here, Keelan. Thanks for joining. And hope you're not too bored. So he's actually prepared for his final exams in school this year. So maybe that's why you're joining, Keelan, see what all the teachers say. So yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think about target language use and using instructions. Do you use the first language? Do you use the target language for instructions? Do you try and make them as simple as possible? If you don't use it, why not? I'd like to kind of hear what you say. And please, those who are on Instagram Live, those who are on the YouTube live stream, please go ahead and type your questions into the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to I feel like I'm talking into space, and I know I do that anyway with the podcast, but it's kind of weird when we have 10 or 12 people here. So please just type in some questions, and then that will help me to get going on something else. I'm just going to open up the YouTube and see if we've got any questions come through there. Okay. All right. Okay. So what do you guys think? We've got quite a few. Delphine, I see, is here. Chamina is here. Lots of people have joined in. Fantastic. People from all over the place. Maybe just type in the chat where are you joining us from, and what are you teaching? Are you off this week, or what are you teaching? It's kind of hard to use this while I'm also talking. Okay. Otherwise, I'm just kind of talking to myself here, but that's okay. Lots of people have been asking me about these Instagram lives, so that's kind of why I decided to do this today. Just put this down. So what do you guys think? Those who are listening, you know, when and how often do you use the target language when you are giving instructions in the classroom? Do you mainly do those in English or in another language, or do you do them in your target language? And why not? Or what's the issue there? Is there a problem with using it, or why does it not work for you? What do you guys think? You know, for me, I just think it's really important to have the more opportunities that we can have to give those inputs to the students, then the better. You know, that's the kind of thing that I find is really, really important. I'm going to try and, if I can get my mouse to work, where is That's because everyone's touching the screen. That's the issue. Okay. So I wanted to bring up some of those questions that came up because there was some really, really great questions actually that listeners sent in for the next episode of the podcast. So Nazia from London, half term for me as well, which is very nice. Definitely needed. I use mainly in English, otherwise sometimes because students don't understand if they start chatting and getting distracted. Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? Like that's why I think lots of people use those English instructions for that reason. And it makes sense. It makes sense, to do that. My gut feeling is just, I think even if we feel like they're not going to understand the instructions that we've given them in the target language, then maybe we have to kind of simplify those instructions if we can, like make them even simpler than what you think you've made, or make them into bullet points. And then you might need to go and ask and see what they think, or things like that I think are really useful. But on your PowerPoints, if you're in class or you're using Google Slides and you've an instruction on the board like, okay, starter activity, put these 3 words into a paragraph and then speak to your elbow partner about it. Like that can be in the target language in my view. And maybe it'll mean that the student will have to say to them, oh, what do we, and you can be circulating the class and checking, and you see, oh, actually they don't understand that, I need to talk about it. But I feel like it's an opportunity lost if we were given all of our instructions in English. Now that's just the way I've always tried to do it. There are of course times when I need to explain things, or maybe there's a keyword in brackets that they might not know, and I'll put that into English. So yeah. Instructions in the target language get students to translate them. Yeah, exactly. That's a really, really good idea. Instructions in the target language, and then if you have a strong student, you can say, can you translate this for me? Or even just 10 seconds with your partner, look at those instructions and make sure you both understand them completely, and you can use English or your mother tongue, and that's a nice way to do it as well. Delphine, nice to see you here, Delphine. Up until now, I've been using target language for Key Stage 5 in Google Classroom, but I see your point. I'll consider it for the other keys. Yeah, like I use it for total beginners, but like we're into our 6th week now with the total beginners, 7th week or something. So I will have it in Spanish, and then what I might do is have it underneath in English as well for the first few weeks. And then maybe I'll start to reduce that and just have a few words in brackets. And and even I remember I did an instruction on Google Classroom, and it had a word in it. I can't even remember the context now, but it had a word that was from our story and that actually ended up coming up in one of our tests or exams or assessments at the end of the unit. And one of the students said, oh yeah, he's always putting that on Google Classroom. And I was like, oh, so the inputs are working for some of those students. So I think that it's a useful way to do it. It's just more inputs. They're getting to read the language, and you simplify that language. So I'll always have it like, number 1, haz la pregunta 6, like do number 6, and number 2, traduce en inglés, or whatever, like translate into English, and just making it really, really simple so that they're getting more and more of those inputs, I feel is important. Quite reluctant to take the risk of using them. Yeah, biolinguistics. I agree with you. It is. When I taught in Ireland, it did feel like a bit of a cultural thing that people were a little bit afraid. I always thinking like there were some of the bravest and most self-confident young people on like a football pitch or on a basketball court. But when it came to using the language in a classroom, they were really shy. And I think that just comes with time, building them up over time, and having that constitution, the class constitution from the beginning, and you always speaking in the target language. And when they say something in the target language, really bigging it up, being like, oh, that was really nice, like really nice pronunciation. And, I understood that. That's so nice. Thank you for using the language. Like, well done. That sounds really good. Like words like that will build them up and make them think, oh, I should use this, and it doesn't happen overnight. It does take constant reminders. And if they're just side chatting in English, for me is a 0 tolerance no. And sometimes I will let them speak together in English when they're explaining something, or speak in their mother tongue, which I think is very important, because you will have mother tongue in there who are not English as their mother tongue. You may have some Polish kids, or you may have some Serbian kids, or you may have some kids who speak Gujarati or whatever, and putting them together and letting them translate it together can be really powerful. But side chatting in English while I'm doing something or someone else is talking to me is an absolute 0 tolerance no. Like stop the class and just say, no, we're in Spanish class, when we only speak Spanish, and getting them to always speak as much as they can in Spanish. Like I know we don't want kids to feel so nervous then that they don't say anything. And sometimes you'll have to adjust with that. If it's a difficult question or an open worded question that you're looking for an open answer, and you may say something like, you can, like you could respond in Spanish or a bit of English too, that's fine. And I'll open that out sometimes if it's kind of more of an explanation one, But I always feel like giving them either ors is a good way to give them to get them to respond in the target language, and that'll build them up a little bit with that. And it just keep with it, Like you have to remember that them wanting to be vulnerable and use the target language in your classroom is going to come from you building up their confidence and making them feel like they can do it. So that's going to be something that comes with time over and over, and constantly making a big effort with that. And if they say something in the target language, then saying to them like, wow, that was really nice. That was really good. And you use Spanish for the whole sentence, or that was a big sentence, well done. Or again, as I say, giving those either ors. So, saying, class, did Michael go to Spain or to France at the holidays? And then they're responding in España or in Francia. They're saying it back to you in the target language. They're building up that confidence at that point. So Delphine, in the class, if possible, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. In the class, if possible, I will say in target language, English is on the board. Yeah, that can be a good way too. EJ from London, biggest issue with CI is behavior. We're a CI department, but with the younger students, the low level disruption and behavioral issues mean I can't continue to do CI. That is a very common comment, T and Jolo Fries, great Instagram name. That's a very common comment, and I actually just did an episode with the wonderful Marianne de Best, who is a primary school teacher in the Netherlands, and her episode will be coming out after Christmas, I think. And I was asking her about that, when it gets like out of hand, what do you do? And she was just saying, it's just a constant returning to the routines. And I think she put it something like, we do the routines on day one, but they never end. Like they never stop. The routines are there every day, constant reminders, and you can never let them go. But as long as the routines are also in the target language, then that's fine. So things like she was saying, the kids might walk into class and then they're all chatting in English, and then she'll just be like, no, okay, it looks like we've forgotten where we are. You forgot we're in Espanoland and we don't speak in English here, not at least together. It's only when I give you that permission. So I think we all need to leave, and then walk out and make them all come outside the door and all line up and say, okay, are we ready now? Okay, then give me the class passport. When you give me that, now we're in Spanish speaking land. And then you walk in one by one. And if you have to do it 3 times, you do it 3 times, but the whole point is you're giving them more input, staying really calm. And I feel that classroom management stuff happens when we're in a rush to get through material. So for me, my classroom management stuff starts to go out the window, or I start to feel like I'm speaking more and more English when I feel like I need to get to the end of this by the end of the lesson, or I need to finish this so I can move on to this next thing. But actually, it's better to just go, do you know what? I need to slow down and make sure that they're meeting all of my expectations, because in the long run, that's what's going to save me the time. And those behavioral issues, just keep going back to your routines, constantly going back to your routines. What is the routine for asking a question? What is the routine for giving you an idea? What is the routine around respect when someone else is speaking? And if it's not met, you stop, you go back. And sometimes I'll just walk them up to the Constitution, show them the word respect, walk them back down. And all that takes time, but it's time you will get back later on. Okay. So I've got someone on YouTube saying, hello, Matthew. And feel free to type in some questions if you'd like to. So I hope that answers a little bit for you. Yeah. Simplify, use as many cognates as possible is really good. Feeling like you're rushing to get, yeah, that is honestly the number one thing, is feeling like you're rushing. And one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, is if you do, for example, when I first arrived at the school I teach in now, it was kind of standard practice to do 6 units in a year. And at the end of each unit, there were 2 to 3 assessments, and sometimes more, sometimes 3 or 4. So that maybe at the end of every unit, they might have had an assessment for reading, writing, speaking, listening, sometimes grouped together. But there was loads of them. And one of the first things I did was just kind of find out, can I just get rid of some of these? Do I have to do 6 units, or can I do 4? And I was told, no, you can get rid of some. You have to do a minimum of 4 assessment pieces, like 2 for each criteria. And so I did the minimum, the absolute minimum of assessment pieces and the minimum of units. so that it gives me lots more scope, and I'm not trying to rush things, go, I have to get the food unit done by the end of this year. No, why? What does it matter if it doesn't get done? It's not like that would maybe matter in a mathematics class where you learn something and then you learn the next thing. But we know that languages do not work like that. You don't learn the present tense and now, oh, that's done, let me move on to past. Languages are not acquired like that. It does not work like that. So what's the point in breaking it up into these units and going, oh, they get into their third year and they haven't done a food unit? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, they'll have picked up in those 3 years just from natural conversation, they'll have picked up the main words like bread and cereal and breakfast and lunch and eat and drink. They'll know the main stuff. They might not know how to say cucumber and avocado. Who cares? They can look that stuff up straight away in 5 minutes and it's done. But the important thing is take stuff out so that you've got more time to be playful and creative and give the comprehensible inputs and do a silly movie talk you've come across that might take 3 classes, and to build them up and to let them have chances to speak to each other. That's how languages are acquired, loads and loads of compelling inputs. And what we don't want to do is to rush through something, end up going half the class in English, because really, if you think you only see them for 2 hours a week and 1 whole hour of that is you giving inputs in English, well, we're wasting a lot of our time because they're not getting the inputs. Really, we need to think about trying to give inputs at as much as we can. People often ask me, what percentage of the time are you in the target language? And like, the best thing would be to ask the students, and I've done it on my feedback form. I do a feedback form usually at the end of every unit, a quick one, but also a big one once a year. And usually the students will say that, like, one of the questions is something like, the teacher speaks almost entirely in Spanish, and it's agreement 1 to 4, and it's nearly always in 4. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm so wonderful, I speak in target language all the time. Not at all. Like, what I'm trying to say is I have struggles with it too, but it is a big goal of mine that I will speak in the target language like 98, 99% of the time, even with the beginners. Those first few weeks, maybe not, because we're getting the routines and making sure they understand and gradually building them up. But, as time goes on, then yes, it's pretty much entirely in the target language. But importantly, it's entirely in the target language at comprehensible input level. I'm not rushing through something because now it's no longer comprehensible to them, and then I'm wasting my time. I'm like, no, I'm not just not going to do that unit. Let's put that one to the side and let's concentrate on these ones, and because they will get better by doing that. Like, trying to think that I do the house vocabulary and then I do the class vocabulary and then I do, that is not how the brain works. It's not how language acquisition works. It's not like you've done the house vocabulary so they know that. Like, that the brain doesn't work like that. Memory doesn't work like that. Language acquisition doesn't work like that. So there's no point in us trying to force it into those boxes that fits neatly in curricula. Just thinking about, where do we want them to be? What kind of content do we want to share with them? Particularly in the first year, there's loads of creativity. In those second and third years, we get more into content like migration patterns and festivals and culture and, reading little novels about like traveling in these places, or maybe it's about bullying or harassment or coming out as gay. All of these little things happen through our novels. So they're getting the content, but through the language at a comprehensible level. So Chamina, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Chamina. I think it is. I'll go back to some of these questions. Any tips for when you have students from a non-CI teacher at the same time when students whom you've already had 3 years, they are on different levels? Yeah, that's tough. And I get that all the time, actually, to be honest. Like, what happens is I'll usually get new students arriving into my class. I'm in their second or third year. So, for example, we start Spanish in year 8. And so in year 9, my students have done a whole year of CI with me. And then I'll get kids come in from year 9 from other schools. And some of them have done 2 years. Mine have only done a year. But they are miles behind where our students are now. I don't mean they're probably better at writing out verb tables. They're probably more accurate at that. They're probably able to write out all the endings, and they might know adjectival agreements, but they're miles behind in terms of understanding and communicating. And they often come to me, and their parents come to me a few weeks later and say, oh, I don't think they're able for this class. He's done 2 years already, but the class is so far ahead. And I always just have to say, look, just stay there, keep reading at night. And I give them little novels to read. Do some Duolingo at night, build up your vocabulary, and just keep listening in class. And gradually, as time goes on, they start to become more and more comfortable, and I start to bring them in lots of confidence. If I see they can do something, I'll make sure I jump on that and say, oh, that's really nice, thank you, for example. So I hope that helps. I'm going to go to, there's some questions on YouTube here. I've got my two screens going on. So Matthew says, what are the effective techniques to teach a student who's learning English as a second language? Well, Matthew, I think the number one thing is just to do it with lots and lots and lots of comprehensible input. So if you listen to the podcast, things like the invisible character is wonderful for beginning students, growing, developing an invisible character together with lots of inputs from them. Also, things like that, Matthew, would be teaching with stories, co-created stories, little novels. So these things work across all languages, and no matter what language it is they're trying to acquire. Hope that helps a little bit. Isabel, buenos dias. How do you make your year 10 speak? I found them to be the quietest in my class. I keep telling us they're GCSE year, but it's hard to make the lesson interactive. So that is a wonderful question. I think I've spoken about this before on the podcast. Year 10 for those in other systems is essentially age 14, 15. And I find every single year that is always the age group I struggle with the most. Because they've had maybe 2 years already and they're in that weird identity stage of, who am I? Am I going to be really cool? Am I going to be nerdy? Am I going to be sporty? I'm starting to like those girls. I'm starting to like those boys. And things do change in year 10. And I, at the beginning, just thought it was with that class. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's just, me, or maybe it's the units. Actually, I'm pretty convinced now after 10 years of teaching that year group, every year, it's that year group that go quiet on me, that don't talk as much. And I think a lot of it is just down to adolescence and puberty and where they are. I know, Chamina, that your first reaction, and most of us would be, is to tell them about the exam and to try and motivate them extrinsically by saying, you have a big exam, come on, let's work at this. But the research would tell us around motivation that those extrinsic motivators may work really very short term, but in the long term, they don't work. They simply do not work. And so we need to go away from that, actually, and maybe don't talk to them about the exam and just try and make it about them. So give them loads of autonomy. Try and do classes that are centered around them, around what they like, around their passions, their interests. Let them be creative. Let them be silly. And let them invent characters, invent stories from a picture, with you guiding it, of course, and giving them the structures. But, it sounds ironic, but actually, the more we remind them of an exam and try and say to them, you should be working hard, you need to be speaking, you're going to need this for the exam, the less they're going to be motivated. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's what comes out in the research. It starts to get a bit better when you get up to age 17, 18, when they've chosen the subject, when they're preparing for university, and then, they are starting to really think about those exams a little bit more. But really motivate them by saying, I want you to be fluent Spanish speakers. I want you to leave here being really comfortable speakers, that when you meet someone in the shop who's struggling with their English, and you can hear in their voice that they are Hispanic, that you can help them out, and you can say to them, and you can say not the words, I speak a bit of Spanish, or I did Spanish in school, or I speak some Spanish, but simply, I speak Spanish, can I help you? Those things, that's how I want you to be when you leave here. And if you do that, then the goal is there. It doesn't matter what you get in the final exam. And if you do that, you're going to do great in the exam anyway, because you're going to be really fluent. So trying to harp on to them about the good things they're doing. Remember, autonomy, creativity, ownership over the learning, competence, making them feel like they're getting it, making them feel like, oh, wow, I'm doing well at this. I'm feeling competent. Don't correct all their mistakes is a good way to do that. And relatedness, relationship to you. You tell them about your histories, tell them about silly things that happened to you, show pictures of you and explain it to them and get them to guess what happened next. All of these things build motivation in students, and they want to be in your class. I'd love to do a more CI approach, but I think many teachers feel a sense of security when following a textbook. How do you ensure a sense of progression? Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a really, really good point. There are some CI curricula out there. I know Martina Bay does one, and that's Bay is spelled B-E-X. I always say Bay, sorry, she pronounces it Bex. Sorry, it's just in Switzerland, there's a town called Bay, and it's spelled B-E-X, and it's pronounced Bay. So actually, Martina told me she pronounces it as her name, Bex, so B-E-X. So if you look at Martina Beck's Comprehensible Classroom, I think it's called, I think she has a whole curricula, and then Adriana Ramirez has a whole curricula for TPRS and CI type teaching. And yeah, you're right. People do like having that textbook there. But I would kind of suggest that just as time goes on, you can build up your units, and maybe you just start with one CI unit, completely CI unit. Maybe you say, right, for this unit, we're not using the textbook at all. We're just going to do it through CI. We're going to build a character. We're going to talk about their experiences and their hair color and their eyes and what they like. And that's going to be our descriptions chapter done. We're going to skip all that in the book. And then maybe the next year you try and do a second one, and you gradually start to build it up, and you get more and more materials. So you're right, though. I am going to be writing a book myself soon enough. I've been saying that for a while, but eventually the podcast will take a break, and I'll now write a book. So I think I might try and write some kind of curricula that teachers can follow along. But yeah, that's an enormous body of work. So yeah, I don't. There's no easy answer to that, but I would say build up your resources over time and just gradually take little bits away from the book. That's how what I did. I had a textbook at the beginning first, and then I realized I was using it less and less. And I was only actually by the end of year 3 just using like kind of 8 or 9 pages of this 100-page textbook, just a few readings that I liked and a few pages with questions that I liked. And then I was like, I don't need this. This is silly. Like, what's the point? I'll just use my own materials now that I've built up. And my curricula is essentially based around these little CI novels. The graded novels are essentially my textbook. They are the things I use in order to give the content. Hello, Jonathan McBride. Oh, so you are violin linguistics or biolinguistics in Edinburgh. Las Vacaciones, we had a lesson creating a story altogether. It's been in the best. Yes, Chamina, that is fantastic. That is exactly it. So when we have these topics like la comida, las vacaciones, los deportes, lo que sea, like whatever things they may be, think like, okay, so I can do this in the old textbook way with a list of all the sports and fill the gaps and join the pictures here. Or I can like get them to invent a sport, combining 3 of them together. What would you do? What would your perfect sport be if you could combine 3 sports? Make them be creative. Then they maybe have to sell it to you like Dragon's Den. That was one of mine one year. And they had to do, get them creative with it, or you invent a sport with them, or they start to give you rules of it. You start with the ball, and then you say, okay, so what's our first rule going to be? Okay, how many times can you bounce the ball, or do you throw it? And then you're giving them the inputs, and okay, maybe they start shouting stuff out, and that's the point where you have to go, okay, class, remember the routines. One person can give me something, but if we can't do this properly, then we can just go back to another way. But I want us to invent this sport together. So yeah, being creative, it just is what makes it the most fun, Roisin, hello. How's it going? Roisin helped me to get started on this big journey. And so that's great to have you here. And Teacher Talk Radio is here as well. Wonderful. I hope you guys are enjoying some of these ramblings. Please do go ahead and put some more questions in the chat. I'm happy to stay on here for another while. The Instagram live is going a lot better than the YouTube channel. I think I've only one person on the YouTube, but there is like 3,000 people a week listening to the podcast, so they're obviously all hiding, or do you know what? They're probably on holiday, so that's all good as well. Simone Grav, hello, great to see you here as well. Lots of great people here in this room. I don't think there's any other questions. Yeah, please go ahead and type in some more questions, guys. I'd love to hear what you think. For me, I just, the creativity aspect is also something that makes it really fun for you as a teacher. Like following along on a textbook and following along with the gap fill exercises and then this verb thing for next and this. Yeah, sometimes you can have a good day when you feel like the kids are really getting it. But when it's creative, like I laugh every day with the students, like every day. They'll make me laugh. They'll say something stupid or silly that I've never thought about before. Or, something will come up or something will happen. And, that's the thing I love the most about teaching with comprehensible input. We just did one of these movie talks recently, a little video on YouTube called Mr. Indifferent, and teaching them the importance of not being indifferent. And that being indifferent is essentially accepting the problems that we have and accepting bullying and accepting harassment. And this is with my year 9s, And so we talked about Mr. Indifferent and why he became better. But, we gave him like a name and a background and what was he doing last week and why is he so tall and slim? Oh, it's because he's been riding a bike for years, but not a normal bike. It's a bike with 18 wheels. And this all came from them and just being creative and silly and letting them put names on stuff. And once they feel like that's how things go in the class, then they'll join in more and they'll start to go for it more. And they'll start to think, we can be creative here. We can, and then they'll be creative in their tests and stuff as well. They'll try and impress you with their creativity when they're writing a story, and they'll try and do fun things. And at the end of the day, that's the stuff that makes you laugh, one of my year 8s, so the total beginners, 6 weeks ago, total beginners, and their first assessment, writing assessment at the end of the 6 weeks is write a story very similar to the one we did in class, but change some details. And so, some of them were really, really funny, like they had like one of them whose dad is really into music. Like he wrote a thing all about Damon Albarn from the Gorillaz, the band, and that, he needed a pencil, but he didn't have a pencil. So he went to Lady Gaga's house. She didn't have a pencil. So he ended up like playing music with her. And this was all after 6 weeks. He could write out this story simply because we did lots of listening to the story, and he could just put in his own things there as well. So yeah, get creative with it. I feel like I might have to end this Instagram live, guys, because there's no other questions coming in, and it seems like people are busy. Maybe this wasn't the best time, or maybe, as I say, most people are just on holidays, and that's cool too. That's something that you should absolutely do. I'm just going to quickly see if we've got anything come up here. Okay. All right. So, hey, Liam, thanks again for all the great content. With CIG, first translate new words. Great question, Isabel. Normally, what I would do with new words and content, that's a really good question. It depends, probably a bit of both. Sometimes it's images, sometimes it's gestures, sometimes it's a translation, sometimes it's all three. It would depend what the task is. So, for example, that activity I just spoke about, the movie talk with Mr. Indifferent. And when I paused the video, I would kind of say, okay, what can we see here? Oh, there's a window, and there's this. Maybe they didn't know the word for windowsill, or maybe they didn't know the word for flower. And then I'll just point that out from the image that's on the board. But then maybe they wanted to tell me something like, he had a bicycle with 18 wheels, and they didn't know how to say wheel. Well, then I might just write that word in English and then put the Spanish beside it. So it kind of depends on the task. If it's a storytelling task, if I'm building a story with them, a story ask, then usually I'll have the structure and I'll put the English beside it, and then they learn, then they gesture it with me. So that's how that one usually goes. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. So it kind of depends. I don't have like a certain fast rule that I first translate, but the important thing is, Isabel, is that they can understand what you're saying. So if that's through gestures, if that's through a picture, or if that's through translating it on the board, whatever, they just need to be able to understand. So if you're talking about, like earbuds or headphones, and they need that word, then maybe you show a picture, and then you maybe show the word, and then you translate. But it's whichever is the quickest to their understanding. So whichever for you feels the quickest is to their understanding. I hope that makes sense. Espero que funcione. Thanks for the words of advice. You're welcome. No problem at all. And just for any of you who are watching this, please feel free to check out there's still a couple of places left on the workshop that I'm doing for Comprehensible Input. So I'm going to do a workshop over 3 Saturdays, roughly around this time. So it'll be, I think it's from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. my time, Swiss time, on 3 Saturdays. And it's essentially a full one-day workshop, but split in 3. And so, yeah, if you check out my website, go on to consultancy, and you'll see that I think there's about 30 people signed up. So there's a couple of spots left. And you'll be students in my class, and I'm going to teach you with some of these CI techniques and give you a chance to do it in breakout rooms, and it should be quite interactive. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about CI and you're not really sure, then have a look at that. It'd be great to do it. And obviously just keep listening to the podcast and sharing it out with people as well. Another question coming here, Violinguistics. Do you have any tips for developing a department-wide CI approach? Our school is very concerned with parity of pupil experience, so it can be tricky to do something radically different from colleagues. Wow, that's difficult. Parity of pupil experience. God, that makes no sense. That makes no sense at all. If you have the ear of one of your like admin in your school, just ask them what research is behind that. Like ask them in a really polite way, like, can you see the evidence base behind why do they want parity of pupil experience? The evidence is overwhelming that we need autonomy in order to feel motivated, and a motivated teacher makes for a motivated student. So if I have no autonomy and you're telling me to do the exact same class as all of my other teachers in my department every day, the exact same, there's no way I'm feeling autonomous about that. And maybe like we in ours, for example, we teach through the same concept. So we might be using the concept of empathy, but I might do the concept of empathy very different to somebody else. And that's the way it should be, really, So if you're trying to develop a CI-wide approach, I think you do have to go softly. You don't want to force people into doing something. You need to show them the benefits, maybe share the podcast with them, and maybe share a couple of it. Maybe you do that in department meetings, listen to 15 minutes of one of the podcast episodes or some of this, and then get them to comment on it and talk about it, or get them to come along to that workshop I'm doing. I think when people see the results of CI, they'll see, a motivated teacher. So my recent thesis for my doctorate showed really quite clearly that using a CI approach is not only very, very motivating for students, but it really is motivating for the teacher. You feel much better at your job. You want to do better. You feel more competent, all of those things. So yeah, that sounds really tricky. Yeah, I'd really try and have a chat with them about that. I can understand where they're coming from. They don't want one student saying like, oh, well, in this class, they're doing this really fun like book and we're doing like verbs and stuff. But you need teacher autonomy. If there's no teacher autonomy whatsoever and everyone is like forced into a box and you have to do exactly the same thing as someone else, you're really like, that's a recipe for disaster, to be honest. So maybe have a chat with them about that. Isabel, de nada. Muchas gracias a ti. Okay, guys, I think I might leave it there, unless someone else has any questions. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. And I'll make this available, of course, on my Instagram page. So feel free to tell other people who missed it to check it out and have a listen. I'm kind of concerned that like the people who are on the YouTube one are just going to see the side of my face because I've been looking this way the whole time. But I am here, people on YouTube. So I'll save that on YouTube as well. All right, muchas gracias a todos. Thank you so much, everyone. Remember, next week's podcast episode 58, believe it or not, is with the wonderful and brilliant Dr. Chris Martin, who did his PhD on motivation, language learning, and parental engagement. So he talks to us all about that next week, and it's such a great episode. So you definitely don't want to miss that one. Chris is wonderful, and you can find him on Twitter. I'm not sure if he's on Instagram, but you can definitely find him on Twitter, Dr. Chris Martin, and you want to listen to what he says. He's got some great stuff. So check that out next week. And then we have some really exciting interviews coming up in the next few weeks. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about some of the ways I do listening and music exercises in my classroom, and just in case they might be useful to any of you guys. And yeah, as I say, please do check out that upcoming Comprehensible Input workshop that I'll be delivering over 3 Saturdays. If you feel like joining, there's a few spaces left. It starts next Saturday, the 6th of November, 4:30 p.m. So still not too late. So check that out. Thank you very much, everyone, for your great questions. I hope I was able to answer some of them. There will be a Q&A episode coming up soon for the podcast. If you have any other questions I didn't get today, just send those in to me. Okay? Muchas gracias. Adiós.